Yep, exactly.
It's going.
Okay. That's for recording purposes. So my name is Nicole Reavy, and I graduated from the TCP program May of this year. And I did my internship at Boulder Center for Conscious Community. Dr. Julie Caldwell was my supervisor then and is also currently my supervisor. I also have a private practice at BC3 where I see couples and individuals. I also have an embodiment group for women, and I have a dream group and a soul collage group that I do. The soul collage group actually will be starting at Nawanda, and that will start in January, and I can tell you more about those things at the end of the presentation. So the topic I'm going to discuss today is embodied mindfulness and sexual intimacy. And I have a profound passion for this because I was in a marriage that started off very passionate and very emotionally connected. And over the years, we became less and less connected to the point where we were sleeping in separate beds and we were not sexually engaged at all. There was no desire. And that was the loneliest I'd ever felt in my entire life. And I thought, wow, if I'm experiencing this, there's probably other people experiencing this. And so that question, I wonder how to have longevity, I wonder how to have sexual intimacy over time, started to stir deep inside of me. Which brings me to this topic. So thank you. I'm really grateful to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really great to see all of you. So my thesis is embodied mindfulness enhances sexual intimacy. I'm going to start us off with an experiential. Okay, so I invite you to close your eyes. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, that's fine. You can do this with your eyes open. Begin to explore your sensations that you notice in your body. So this could be tension, coolness, pressure, heat. Just take a moment to explore what's there. And now pick one sensation that you would like to focus your attention on. Allow yourself to focus on the sensation and continue to breathe. If it's too challenging to move directly into the sensation, go into the neighborhood around it. Ask yourself if there is emotion connected to this sensation. Mad, sad, scared, or sexual. Once you have labeled the emotion, allow yourself to feel as sad, scared, mad, glad, or sexual as you feel in this moment. Keep breathing. notice if you want to move away from it, and see if you can move towards it. Has the emotion shifted or changed in any way? It may have gotten bigger. It may have become a different emotion than what you initially labeled it as. Just notice. Now ask yourself what you want. Allow the answer to come from your body and trust what arises. And this could be anything. Gently come back to the room. Open your eyes. And would anyone like to say anything about their experience with that? Raise your hand if you feel more embodied. Raise your hand if you feel less embodied. Okay. Thank you. So what we just did is called S.E.W, which stands for sensation, emotion, want. So this is an embodied mindfulness practice which allows us to bring attention to our present moment experience. It supports us in knowing what we're actually feeling when we're feeling it. A lot of times in intimate relationships, we might not even know that we're angry until a few days later. And we might be passive aggressive to our partner and be like, they're so angry. And actually we're angry. We're not owning what's happening here, but maybe we don't even have the presence to know what's happening here. And so what this does is it's an invitation to actually feel what you're feeling when you're feeling it, and know what you're feeling when you're feeling it. This supports connection to yourself, which is imperative to actually have true connection with your partner. I'm focusing on sexual intimacy here. I'm focusing on intimate partnership. And I also want to say, as upcoming therapists, you all are, this also applies to being a therapist in the room with our clients. The other important thing, sometimes clients will say, oh, I'm not emotional. I don't have emotions. What are you talking about? I don't have any feelings. So a great way to support that is to actually help people find a sensation. Most people can find a sensation. And usually there is a link. There is a link to an emotion. Yes, sometimes we have injuries, and so yes, we're having more sensation in a particular part of our body. And we usually can access a sensation outside of that. Why is this important? It's important for a lot of reasons. And I feel like as humans, this is so important to our long-term well-being on multiple levels, because we have bodies we are sexual beings in most cases. That is our basic life force. We live in a disembodied and disconnected society. Most people in the society live from their minds. And our minds are not present. Our bodies are present, they don't really have a choice. So if we're more embodied, we're more present. Even if it's a little tiny microcosm of attention to our body, that brings us more present. Also in my research, I learned that a lack of sexual motivation affects 40% of women ages 16 to 44. And when I read that, I was shocked. I'm going to define, most of us know what mindfulness is. This is a simplified definition. Awareness of present experience with acceptance. Embodied mindfulness, awareness of what is happening in your body with acceptance. This includes sensations, feelings, and emotions. How is this helpful? So it gets us to slow down, connect with sensations, feelings, and emotions, access what we want in the moment. That is so important. And that changes all the time. And this is really important in relationship. Because, yeah, we can know our partner. We can know what they normally like, what their patterns are. However, that changes. That can change moment to moment. But we don't know unless we check in. So it also supports moving from reactive brain to creative brain, where we have more choice, where we're less involved with drama and creating our partner as a villain or a victim. And ultimately, we are more connected to ourselves, which allows for the possibility of connection with others. So according to the Journal of Marital and Family Therapy, this is a quote, mindful relating holds an open and receptive attention to the present moment. Mindfulness promotes a more accepting and less experientially avoidant orientation to challenging emotions, such that a more responsive and relationally healthy modes of responding become possible. So when we are embodied, when we are present, we can relate. We can connect. That possibility is there. It also cultivates a new relationship with your thoughts and feelings rather than changing them. So we're not trying to change anything. We're relating to it. We're being curious about it. We're allowing it to inform us and create something different that might not have been accessible before. And this new relationship is less avoidant, more accepting, compassionate, and aware. What is sexual intimacy? It's a lot of things to a lot of different people. And it also could be eroticism, desire, passion, love, and emotional connection, mutual closeness, embodied presence, going toward connection with yourself and other. So this is a quote by me. Embodied mindfulness cultivates differentiation. So the word differentiation is a biological term. It's how cells develop. So all cells begin with the same material, and as they begin to change, they take on unique properties and perform separate but related functions. And this process of differentiation helps us become more uniquely ourselves in relationship with those we love. So we don't have to take space to be ourselves. Some people have to leave to go be themselves. If you're differentiated, you don't have to. So you're able to function with a mutuality, independently and interdependently. And you're connected to yourself first, then your partner. I'm repeating that over and over and over again because it is a profound concept. It's easy to talk about, it's hard to do. So keep in mind, this is a practice. It also supports our need for stability and mystery when we're differentiated. I use these words interchangeably, reminding you that the S.E.W. is a practice that cultivates differentiation, which in turn deepens the possibility for sexual intimacy. What does not support sexual intimacy? I'm sure a lot of us have some ideas about what that might be. According to my research, emotional fusion. I was a prime example of this. I could tell you what was happening with my partner, but I could not tell you what was going on with me. So I was self-abandoning. I was also wanting him to validate me, which is other validated intimacy instead of self-validated intimacy. Lack of embodiment also contributes to all of this. And then, of course, the compelling drama triangle of victim, villain, hero. So all of that leads to disconnect. Disconnect from self, disconnect from other. Embodied mindfulness supports self-validated intimacy, moves us toward connection with our partner, shifts us from desire out of horniness to desire for the other partner. It cultivates depth of connection rather than technique, and emotional stimulation is often more powerful than a genital function or touch, and that was definitely my direct experience. And I don't know if any of you identify with that, but that is also what the research says. I'm going to go back to the S.E.W. again. I want to emphasize directly what that experience is right now in this moment for me. So right now, I notice tension in my throat. So what I'm noticing right now is that I'm scared. I'm feeling fear. What I want is to communicate my topic clearly. So that's an example of S.E.W. directly in the room. When I tell you I notice tension in my throat, that's an unarguable truth. Your partner can try to argue with that. They may try. And you're the expert on yourself. You live in your body. This is your home. So I know where tension lives in my body. I know what's happening. I can communicate that, and then I can access my emotional body. I can stand here and sustain my connection to the fear. I've just connected to myself. And now my partner can move towards me through the same process, and then something can be co-created out of that. I'll explain more in a few slides. So Helen Fisher has done a lot of research with couples, and she's also backing up the importance of emotional connection. So this yearning for emotional togetherness far surpasses the desire for mere sexual release. And 75% of men and 83% of women in the survey agreed with this statement. So when a couple comes in, or an individual, and they're like, I don't know, I mean, my relationship just is not working at all. We don't have sex, we don't want to talk to each other, I don't even know where to begin. So of course we begin with S.E.W, and we also look at these areas. So in a relationship, if you're not speaking truth, if you're not allowing yourself to have your feelings or take 100% responsibility for your part and make agreements that work, usually if we start to look at these areas, things start to transform. So if one of these isn't working, usually that affects the connection in a big way. And I also want to emphasize the embodied mindfulness helps us access truth in the moment, which helps us transform agreements. It helps support us make agreements that we want to make instead of agreements that we don't want to make to please our partner or to maybe avoid conflict. And this can shift and move all the time, just like truth shifts and moves all the time. Co-creating sexual intimacy. Sexual intimacy needs space. It needs mystery. And Esther Perel talks a lot about this in her work. Fire needs oxygen. Truth is mysterious and unpredictable. Truth is that mystery. It's the unknown. The present moment is the unknown all the time. So we can't assume that we know our partner. We might have stable areas where, oh, okay, yeah, I know you like cream in your coffee, for an example. And we can assume that, but when it comes to being touched or when it comes to sexual intimacy, what we need changes at different times. So being able to access that and speak that feeds that fire. Telling your partner what you want creates the opportunity to receive it. If you don't know what you want, how can you receive it? How can you tell your partner what you want if you don't even know? So this is the opportunity to cultivate that for yourself. There's a lot of embodied mindfulness practices. I focus on S.E.W with clients. It's been really successful. And there's also savoring. This is something clients can do with themselves. They can also do this with a partner. It's awakening the senses through taste, touch, smell, sight. Embodied touch is also really powerful. In our culture, we have a lot of focus on the goal of orgasm. If you have an orgasm, then you've been successful in your sexual relationship. That's not necessarily the case. So remembering that the skin is the largest sex organ. Touch is really important. And play. I also want to say what I've noticed with clients is that they're more playful when they're present. When they're not present, they're in the past or the future, it's hard. It's hard to play. It's really hard. So these are some examples of couples that I've worked with. And Linda and Stephanie were a couple that had not had sex for a number of years. They started to explore connecting to themselves through the S.E.W process. And this started to grow a mystery and an attraction that wasn't there before. Jason and Teresa spent a lot of time in the drama triangle. There was a lot of lying going on from Jason's side. He also felt like he was being smothered by his partner. because she was invading his emotional space all the time and telling him what he was feeling. So they actually started to communicate truths that had been withheld, and through that process grew an attraction again to one another. And Jason felt like he had space to actually speak what was true, and that his energy wasn't so invaded by her telling him what he was feeling. Ryan and Sally worked a lot with unarguable truths, and that's the example I gave you of speaking what's happening directly with the body, and actually feeling the emotional body and letting that digest like food. And this in turn increased their sexual play and exploration. So again, it's easy to talk about, it's hard to do, it's a practice. It's hard for me to do, and I'm teaching this. So it is a moment-to-moment practice. Especially when our partners are in reactive brain, it's hard to sustain that connection to yourself because it's so compelling to want to jump into the triangle. So what is relevant is what works for you and your partner, not necessarily what works for other people. This goes back to the differentiation piece. Allow yourself to explore and trust your own direct experience. So don't believe anything I've said. Just like the Buddha would say, explore for yourself. Maybe this works for you, maybe it doesn't. If it does, awesome, share it. If it doesn't, then you can try something else, you know? As far as therapists go and doing work with clients, S.E.W. and savoring through the senses have been the most impactful for enhanced sexual intimacy. There's also other possible things that people get into that's helpful for them. I'm not going to go into those right now, but these two have worked the best for me. Give pleasure homework. This also applies to individuals, not just couples. A lot of people have a hard time with pleasure. So just to have permission from someone they trust, their therapist, to give them, like, hey, what does give you pleasure? And it might not even be sexually related. It could be the littlest thing. It could be a cup of tea. It could be a bath. So just letting, helping clients explore, oh, what does give me pleasure? What does help bring me into my body? And then, of course, supporting exploration and play. What are the benefits? There's a lot of benefits. Connection, presence, awareness, increased pleasure, eroticism, desire, passion, more sexual play, increased oxytocin, which is the love hormone, nonverbal affection and trust. And these are really valuable. These help people improve their quality of life on multiple levels. It also decreases aggressive behavior and stress, which I think a lot of us can use.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Esther Perel. She says, focus on feeling itself, disassociating it from socially implanted ideas of how it's supposed to be. So this is going to inform us. Our bodies are going to inform us. And that's going to be the teacher. That's going to show us what resonates and what doesn't. And we can also notice where we have these social interjects. And we can come from a place that's from direct experience. So I want to thank Dr. Julie Caldwell, who is still my supervisor at BC3. Also, Boulder Center for Conscious Community. We actually do this practice every other week. So it's Tuesday evenings from 6 to 8:30, and it's 28th Street in Arapahoe. I can tell you more information if you're interested. And it's $5 drop-in. So if that's something you want to explore, if you want to be in a community does help support this. So this is where we practice S.E.W. I also want to thank David Snark, who has inspired me with the differentiation process and the power of that. Esther Perel, John Wellwood, and mindfulness leaders, of course, in the Ropa faculty, and my past partners, my ex-husband and my current partner, and clients. So these are my references. That's it. So any questions? Any shares? Anything? Any questions?
Yeah. Have you had much experience with like working with maybe a couple per se, and maybe one of them has some sexual trauma? How kind of bringing all of this in has maybe helped process, or
This is a great question. So I do have a client that has a lot of sexual trauma. So we did EMDR and worked with her nervous system because she had a very small window of tolerance. So it was hard to actually go right into an S.E.W. process with her. So now she actually is doing it more. She had to find safe places within her body that she could go to. And she's able to access even, her small toe or a fingertip, and that's worked for her. So her window of tolerance has increased. So, but people that have a lot of trauma and it's hard for them to go into the body, it's really good to be aware of, okay, they might need some EMDR before we actually plunge into this. But she now does it. She now notices when she disassociates and is able to bring herself back. And it's made quite an impact in her relationship. So, does that answer the question? Okay, great. Great question.
Thank you. Oh, questions?
Oh, you're so welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious around the making agreements thing, because I know that you briefly touched on it, but can you just maybe give like a little bit more of an example of like what, because I remember working with agreements at BC3, and it was like a really big thing, and I just, in the context of intimacy, like just what more that would look like, making agreements with your partner.
So I'm going to go back to the couple that spent a lot of time in the drama triangle.
Yeah.
They had not had an agreement to speak truth. So what came out of their process was that they made an agreement, no matter how difficult it would be, that they would work with their withholds and speak what was true. Okay, so that's one way. But it could show up in any kind of agreement. Like, it could be something really tiny. It could be, hey, I know that we have allowed shoes in the house, and I'm noticing I feel angry when people wear shoes in the house, right? And so how do we create an agreement that works for both sides, that's a win-win?
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 'cause
Okay.
it's such a spectrum. It can be like the smallest agreements to the biggest, so yeah, thanks for breaking that down.
And it does create a lot of freedom too,
Yeah.
to recreate and have it be this live, fluid, active connection to work with relationship. And it's helpful too when a partner says, well, actually, you know what I just noticed? We just made an agreement that I actually don't want to make, so let me check in again.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I love your presentation. I teach couple therapy and studied for many years, and I love how you merge the theory of differentiation of self with mindfulness, and it's something that I've been talking about for a while, but I think mindfulness supports the differentiation process. And also I think it would be nice if you talked a little bit more about like Murray Bowen's original theory of differentiation of self, and how I always mispronounce their name,
Snarch.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Snarches actually use that theory in their Passionate Marriage book, and
Yes.
that's really kind of the key theoretical perspective, that the lens that they see their couple therapy from,
Yeah.
which is quite interesting and unique and different from other couple therapists.
Right.
So I think it's wonderful to look at all this. And then also just, maybe my question is, there's a separate field of sex therapy that's quite different from couple and family therapy.
Yeah.
And there's been, over the past years, really a push to incorporate sex therapy into couple therapy. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit, because there's people that are like registered sex therapists, that are sex therapists, that's their specialty. And then there's couple therapists, and many times people that are practicing couple therapists are just not informed in sex therapy, and yet that's a crucial part of relationships and a crucial issue that many couples bring. So there's just many people that practice couple therapy don't have that skill.
Right.
So maybe you could speak to that a little bit. What could a couple therapist do to inform themselves, or how can they work better with this issue that many couples do have?
This is a really rich question. Number one, I want to say that I don't know how, as a therapist, that you can't talk about sex. There's a lot of therapists that can't talk about sex in the room because they're not comfortable with their own relationship to their body, to sex, to passion, to whatever that is. They have their own trauma. So I do feel that yes, we can work with couples and not be sex therapists. I don't know what depths you can go to without that. Like, you don't have to technically be a sex therapist necessarily. Does that make sense? And I also feel like I could teach this and not bring sex into it. So it's very accessible. Any therapist could use this and not be a sex therapist and not be a couples therapist. So your question, I feel like I answered that piece. And then you asked about becoming a sex therapist? Or how that's applicable? I don't think they're separate. That hasn't been my experience, to separate those two worlds, to separate working with couples and sex therapy. Now, some of the sex therapists that I've worked with are really hyper-focused on the physiology. And that is an aspect. That's an aspect that I think is interesting. And that's not my specialty. So a couples therapist is going to be less focused on that, I think. So if you really want to specialize and you really want to understand the physiologies of what's going on, because there are a lot of detailed implications that are going on that I don't address here. This is very general. And I also think it's really important to be comfortable talking about sex. And I was terrified to bring this topic to Naropa University because there's only one class on human sexuality, and you don't even have to take it.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember we can only hold the space for our clients in the depths that we have gone. If we haven't gone there, we're going to stop our clients, whether it's conscious or unconscious. So I think the more comfortable you are with your own life force, your own sexuality, I think that alone, even if you don't address it directly, is profound.
I certainly think that your presentation has implications for training and for the field, not just for therapy. So there's a lot of like subdivisions in mental health. As there are in the medical profession, like there's this specialist, that specialist, and there's sex therapy, couple therapy, family therapy, And all of those are different specialty areas, and there's not enough overlap. So I just feel like, yeah, there really isn't enough training in sex, sexuality, for people that become couple therapists. And there's kind of a call to merge the fields a bit more and not keep them so separate. So I've seen couple therapists then refer a client to sex therapy. And, you know, if there was just more training, more integration, that may not be necessary, because you could deal with it in this kind of a way. You know, it may not be an actual, like, physical sexual dysfunction that needs that level of, like, micro analysis.
Right.
So, yeah, I really appreciate your presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, I love the accessibility.
I'm wondering if there are any questions about Nicole's experience doing the capstone. If you have begun to wrap your head around that enough to have questions, or if you have advice, general advice for what you know is ahead for everyone this next semester.
I have a question. This might be obvious, I guess, but I was making notes already about ideas I got from your presentation, so thank you for, I feel very creative from hearing yours. And I'm thinking about doing interviews and like what that looks like. Like, did you do heuristic interviews, or?
I did do some interviews, and I would definitely recommend that, for sure. And I got a lot of support from the ROPA faculty as well. Professors that I had a lot of respect for helped me move forward with this topic, and I was able to sit down with them and get information, so that was also helpful. ResearchGate was also a really impactful experience through articles and then of course books. So, but I definitely think it's helpful to be able to be face to face with someone and ask them questions that's interested in the same topic and that has experience. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So advice. Pursue something that you naturally are drawn to. That maybe has been a question, an inquiry in your life, from your personal experience, something that's challenged you, that you just want to know more about. Like, how can I help myself? How can I help others in this area? And trust that. Trust the impulse of what you're drawn to, because it ripples. And you're going to be more engaged, you're going to be more embodied doing it. It's going to resonate for your audience because they can feel your passion for it. And this could carry you. This could carry and turn into research. This could turn into a book. This could turn into presentations across the US. You don't know. So trust trust what you're drawn to. Allow yourself to integrate. I think that's really important. Integration, taking information from different research, different authors, and really allowing that to marinate and percolate in you, and then creating a synergy. Because I do think the future of this field is going to look more collaborated, and we're going to be therapists that have multiple skills, and I think that's necessary because we're whole beings. Have fun. Use this as a motivator to push you, and take feedback. So when you're presenting to one another, take the feedback in. How can I improve my presentation? You know, what maybe do I need to let go of so it's more simplified for the audience? Because I have definitely simplified my topic. But I want you to leave with something that you can take out into your own life. So those are the pieces of advice I can think of. Does anyone else have questions? Yes?
So sexuality, intimacy, mindfulness are such big topics, and I'm wondering how you yourself condensed the focus of your research and your presentation to something as confined as the capstone with, so much to choose from as far as which directions to go and what to get into.
Well, I've been reading about this stuff for a while, for probably 5 years. So I felt really comfortable with the information. So I feel like I already had a foundation, knowledge-wise, and then I had my direct experience, and then it led me to my internship, which started to feed. Because I wasn't pursuing an internship where the supervisor was focused on couples therapy, but that's what found me. So all of that combined, and then my background in mindfulness, just started to feed. It's like all the rivers led, they started to move towards each other. I think it's tricky when we pick a topic that we don't know anything about, and we're just starting to read, like this year, and I know people did that. I think that's why if you can dig into yourself and really find something, I bet there is something that most of you have if you look at your life that can hone that question. So having a question fed me.
Yeah, like I noticed you had a thesis that you
Yeah.
started with. Was that helpful to have something
So
like that to
helpful.
anchor it? Okay.
So helpful. It was like, okay, what's my burning question here? And what is it that I'm really trying to say? What am I trying to communicate to my audience?
One of the things I noticed, kind of, Chris, also too,
Sorry,
oh, sorry, you wanna go first?
Building on what you're just discussing, I'm remembering Sarah's presentation, and she's worked with eating disorder stuff her whole life.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like her dharma, like she knows it. And you initially introduced the subject as something you've worked through thoroughly. And I'm just reflecting on the inherent value of that and my own reflection for what I want to present. And I'm just inwardly clarifying that, and also have a question around it. Do you feel many of our peers did the same? It's like, this is kind of my specialty because it's what I've worked with in myself. Did you see that in our cohort in terms of people's capstone presentations?
Some people. Yeah, and I think the people that did have that deep foundation, that's what led them to this program in the first place. Because they were already drawn to like a certain kind of research because of their own experience.
Yeah, cool.
And there were other people that were like, I have no idea, so I'm gonna pick a topic. And that's fine too, that's part of your journey. I just think if it's more organic, it can have a profound impact.
Yeah, thank you. This is clarifying.
Yeah, I think we get in our heads and we're like, oh, what's that thing, what's that thing? But then if we like really drop in and check in, it's been there all along.
Yeah.
It's kind of been like,
Is your
right,
thing.
yeah.
I wanted to make one other comment. Yeah, I want to make one other comment of sort of what I observed you do, and kind of also for Chris to kind of answer that a little bit, is that, it's such a big topic, looking at mindfulness and intimacy. I mean, you could really just research this for days and years, but you picked a lens, and you used the lens of differentiation. So you used a theoretical perspective. That's something that, like the book Passionate Marriage, it probably spoke to you, or you cited it. And so you looked at it through that lens, and that then sort of slices away a lot of other things, because, otherwise it would be sort of a review of how many different people, including yourself, see the subject matter.
Right.
So I don't know, as an observer, I thought that was helpful, that you were clear that that was the lens through which you were looking at this question, or the theoretical perspective that you were offering.
Yeah, thank you for that. As you're talking, I'm remembering how I learned about the 5 Buddha families when I did my 2.5 years of undergrad at Naropa. And I remember that was this moment of oh wow, self-abandonment. I started to connect, oh my gosh, I totally know what's going on over there, and I don't know what's going on over here. So yes, when I start this presentation, I'm talking about my marriage, because my marriage helped me really hone the question because of the suffering. But when you said that, it's as I go back, there's even more depth here.
In what Buddha family did you discover that? I'm just curious. Or in what neurotic family is that where you lose yourself into the other? Is that a Padma thing? Yeah.
So much red,
Well, you did the undergrad, so you did the
I was
Buddha family.
thinking about the family.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's the room. The room is red. Yeah. I think I'm at time, so I want to honor the structure of time. And if anyone has a burning question, comment, I'm also open.
Thank you so much. So we'll take a break now and let the classes separate, and if you have any further questions, I know you're doing this.
So I also want to
Separation.
say that if anyone wants a card, and I normally have a handout.
Oh.
So, thank you.
I'd be happy to talk about that too.